talk. This is a great way to finish strong. There's not going to be any code, so we're going to feel refreshed and light and ready to attack our jobs with utmost fervor by the end of this. Also, I have a lot of stock images in my slides, and apparently the internet believes that work-life balance for women must include like children, but none of the images I found had children, like when there were dudes in the picture. So I decided to be like subtly sexist and only have a man on the slide instead of being like overtly sexist and having something like this. I'm not kidding. This was the first 5 images on Google search for like work-life balance women, and they all have kids. It's weird. Anyway, so for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to assume that both men and women are capable of having families and having work-life balance. It's a crazy concept, I know. So first, let's watch a quick clip from WWDC 2019. I know this is an Android conference, but I promise it's going to be relevant.
Apple on all of the products that you saw.
Oh man, it's not playing the, oh God, everything's gone wrong.
This morning, these guys have given up their nights and weekends from their families and so on and so forth, and many of these innovations are years in the making. So thank you. Let's give them a round of applause.
All right, so I think it was playing off my laptop, so before we get to what he said, let's take a quick step back and define work-life balance. If I wanted to define, I think a great place to start is Wikipedia. The state of equilibrium in which the demands of personal, professional, and family life are equal. I like this definition because it makes the distinction between personal and family, which I think is really important. I dislike it because it implies that all 3 are given equal weight, and let's be honest, that's never what happens. But now we have Tim Cook getting up on stage and saying, I'd like to thank everyone who gave up their nights and weekends in order to make this possible. I think that's pretty wild that he just got up on stage and admitted that Apple had such poor planning that people needed to work nights and weekends in order to ship all of the crazy things that they shipped at WWDC. My personal opinion on the matter is that if it's not an emergency and I'm working off hours, something really terrible has happened and some really poor planning has happened. So we're going to talk about how to make that better for yourself. So here's our agenda for the rest of the talk. First, we're going to be mean to Apple. Check. Then we're going to talk about the components of work-life balance. We're going to go through a quick self-assessment. We're going to look at ourselves. Then we're going to talk about how to make better choices and build more intentional balance in our lives. And finally, hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. So, quick disclaimer before we get started, I'm not a doctor, and this talk is not a diagnosis. If you're feeling depressed, if you feel like there's a lot going on in your life, I recommend that you don't take advice from some random dude at droidCon who has a PowerPoint. Just a suggestion. Of course, you have to take my advice to not take my advice. Anyway, if you feel like stuff really isn't going right, I really do encourage you to reach out to a community group or a mental health professional. Part of work-life balance is self-care, and we'll talk about it more in a moment, but taking care of your mental health is part of work-life balance. So that's just something to think about. All right, now to the fun stuff. We've used the standard Wikipedia definition of work-life balance, but what does that mean to us as programmers? All of these sections I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, not because they're not important, but just because there's a lot of stuff, and this isn't the interesting part. So just to get started, we can see a very fake but useful pie chart on these 3 different components from our definition. There's family, there's professional, and there's personal. Let's break them down in turn and talk about all these different things that can tug your work-life balance in different directions. So first we've got the professional component, and which I'm really loosely defining as things that relate to your career. And that can be things like your boss saying that you need to be in the office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That can be voluntarily working nights and weekends in order to complete a project on time. Now that could be because you enjoy the work, or it can be because you're feeling pressure from your boss in order to finish. That can be things like professional development, like, coming to a conference. It can be reading new programming articles. That can be trying out a language in your spare time. And things like that are complicated because it blends the line between what's a work and what's hobby, right? If you're trying out Kotlin for your company, but you're doing it on your personal time, is that a hobby or is that work? Something to think about. And we'll talk about that more as well. There's also things like answering emails or text messages or Slack in your personal time outside of normal business hours. Things like crunching, which happens a lot in the game industry, or mandatory overtime, or honestly, even thinking about work outside of business hours. That's taking time away from the other things that are important to you in your life. Now, quick poll, how many of you come from countries that have strong worker protections? Like, for example, France has, I think it's a law that you're really not allowed to email people outside of business hours unless you're willing to pay them overtime. How many of you come from a country like that? All right, so like a solid third of the room. Someone talked to me about this before the talk, and I think it's important to know that even if you do come from a country that has these protections, the US has no such concept. Like, it's not illegal for anyone to email you at any time of the day or night, for the most part. Even if you do have, these laws on the books, I think it's still difficult, because if your boss emails you after hours, it's hard to like push back against that sort of thing. The existence of laws doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to be followed, so it's important to know how to set these boundaries regardless of what the laws are in your country. Maybe you move countries, there's a lot of stuff there. Moving on, we've got personal component, loosely related as things relating to you that take time. And that can be things like sleeping, that can be things like non-work hobbies, like side projects that you're doing or volunteering. It can be going to the gym or running or things like that. There's the emotional labor that you do for your friends and for your coworkers, things that are like non-technical but still take that oomph out of you, make you feel tired the next day. There's vacation and travel and taking time to see the world. And then there's disability and health issues. That's short-term stuff. Maybe you got a cold, maybe you worked too long and so you got a cold, maybe you twisted your ankle. Long-term stuff is burnout, chronic disability, chronic injury, or any range of mental health issues. And these, they're not necessarily bad, but these things like take time out of our lives. If you're walking slower because your ankle hurts, right? Like that takes time, and that's time that you're not doing other things. And finally, I call this the family component, but it's really like the social/group component. And that can be things, maybe you have a family, maybe you have children. Family doesn't necessarily need to mean like blood relatives, right? We all choose our family, whether that's our flatmates, whether that's a book club, whether that's friends that we see every week for food. These are all things that are our group, our family. We're all social creatures, and so making sure that we have that community and that place that we can go to for support is really important. So now we're going to do a quick self-assessment. So if you have a phone, grab a phone. If you have a laptop, you can grab the laptop and go to that link there. It's surprisingly, even though it's interactive, like it's a mobile page and a laptop page, it works pretty nicely. And let's fill this out together. It's not going to take more than a couple minutes, but we're going to work on this balance wheel, and that's going to kind of guide the discussion for the rest of the talk. So I hope I have it open. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, sorry, 1 second. Where is it? Why is it there? Okay, who still needs the link? Raise your hand. Okay. In retrospect, I probably should have made it one of those like Word with URLs as opposed to just using the default, but now I know for next time. Okay, who still needs it? Great. I'm going to keep filling mine out. Ten is best, 1 is not best. What happened? Yes, that's fine. Okay, the internet broke for me. Or we just, murdered the website by 50 people joining it at the same time. All right. Let's go back here. So let's just take this one as an example, since I think since we just hugged of death that poor little website. It's not my website, I literally just found it on the internet. So there's a couple different categories here, I'll read them off to you. There's friends, there's health, there's career, there's love, spirituality, family, money, and fun. And what we can do is take a second and think about what time you're allocating to each of these areas and how happy you are with that allocation. And before we talk about what it should be, remember that life is messy and that no one's life is perfect. The idea here isn't to have perfect 9s or 10s across the board. It's to understand whether what you want matches what you need. So let's take a second to think about, if you manage to fill out the balance wheel, great. How does your balance wheel compare to your calendar? In that, how does what you're doing, how does what you want reflect the reality of what you're doing? Second, I guess the better way to ask that is, are you happy where your time is allocated right now? And what areas would you want to reprioritize or deprioritize? Are you spending time in places that you aren't really happy with? So in that vein, let's talk about how to make better choices and build a more intentional balance. So you might be asking, who's this guy and why is he qualified to talk about work-life balance? You're right, I am just this guy. And I don't have all the answers. I reached out to some of my friends in the Android community, and a lot of them have gone through similar situations. For example, I don't have a technical degree. My major course of study in university was cognitive science, right? So I came into the working world feeling like I had something to prove to everyone else, and I think a lot of us can sympathize with that. In addition, a lot of my friends that I talked to, some of them were single, some of them are married, some of them have kids, some of them are men, some of them are women, as you can tell by the emojis. Some of them have worked at big companies, some of them at small companies. Some of us are individual contributors, some manage people. Kind of all across the board, I try to get people with variable levels of experience. That being said, in any survey, there are blind spots. There are things that aren't really encompassed. Not all aspects of identity were really well represented in the 5 people that I talked to. For example, no one really volunteered that there were LGBTQ+. That doesn't mean they were, that doesn't mean they weren't, that just didn't really come up. I only talked to some folks of ethnic minorities, and those were ones that tended to be relatively well represented in tech already. And finally, although there's a little bit, disability wasn't really well represented. So that doesn't mean that nothing that I talk about is useful, hopefully. I think it's still important to be able to talk in broad generalities about what things are useful components of how to build a good work-life balance. So I came up with 3 different themes under which to discuss the advice I got from my friends. And they are: balance takes balance, balance takes intention, and balance takes consistency. So let's take that first one. Balance takes balance. And to kind of start us off, I have a couple quotes from the survey that I did. Unless I'm working on something I feel is directly relevant for my personal benefit, I don't write work code after hours. My laptop stays closed and out of reach. And the other quote on the flip side of it is, my problem was that I enjoyed working too much and allowed it to monopolize my free time. Burnout happened because work became stressful and draining, and that meant the main thing in my life was stressful. So how do we kind of take this and make it actionable? First is diversify your happiness. Coding in your free time is fine. I don't think anyone should tell you that you should or shouldn't do something in your free time. But when work is stressful and your wind down activity is programming, that means you've got no buffer. Suddenly, the main thing that you've got going on is something that might be stressing you out. So don't put all of your don't put all of your eggs in one basket, rather. Make sure that you've got a wide variety of activities that you can enjoy and that help you feel regenerated as a person. Second of all, balance is a trend line, not a single coordinate point. Maybe you're on a crazy project and so you have to stay late a couple days out of the week. I think that's okay. I don't think beating yourself up for staying till 7 p.m. one night is really healthy. That being said, if you are staying late every night for like a month, that's poor planning on your company's part. And I think realizing that over time these things tend to compound, right? You get home late, you have dinner late, you go to bed late, you have to wake up at the same time because you still have to be at work, and suddenly you're getting less sleep, you're going to feel tired. This has an additive effect on your ability to be a good teammate and write the code that you want to write. Finally, pressure needs balance too. And what do I mean by that? Pressure kind of comes from two places. It comes from within and it comes from externally. If your pressure is coming from your manager or your peers, think about the cultural or maybe even job changes that need to happen in order to make this better for you. Stacy actually had a really good talk about this about 30 minutes ago, so you should definitely look that up if you weren't there. Maybe your boss doesn't know that they're pushing you like this. Maybe it's worth talking to them and say, hey, it feels like you're asking me to be here until 9 p.m. every night. That's not something that really works for me. I have tons of other things I need to be doing with my time. In the end, most of us are salaried, and so that means that we are kind of expected to be at work for a certain amount of time. Anything past that is, to quote Stacy, free money for the company. Alternatively, the pressure might be coming from yourself, right? In my case, I felt like I had something to prove. I didn't have a technical degree like a lot of my coworkers, and so I felt the need to work extra hours just to, be productive like them. But I think the thing to realize is, just like I believed that my coworkers deserved to be at my job, right? I have to believe, just for my own benefit, that I deserve to be there too. And when my coworkers look at me, I have to believe that they think that it's worth it for me to be there. And if that's not the case, then I think I do need to find another job, because just like I believe that my coworkers deserve to work, with me, then that should be reciprocated. So let's talk the next about consistency. What I mean by consistency is building rituals for yourself and sticking to them. It's important to make sure that you're taking that time and building out these aspects of your life that you can fall back on. So one of our friends said, I found myself unapologetically just taking time for my well-being when I need it. And that's important. There's almost nothing that will come in the way of me and my exercise, hobbies, or sleep schedule. I feel no guilt for pursuing them. So, kind of obviously, what I suggest is building consistency at work and building consistency with yourself. When I say work, what I mean is having consistent working hours will set boundaries both for yourself and for your manager, right? If you show up at the same time every day, but sometimes you leave at 10, sometimes you leave at 9, sometimes you leave at 5, no one really knows what to expect from you out of a working day. If you're pretty consistent and you always leave at 5:30 or 6 p.m., then they know, and you know for yourself that anything past that is kind of outside of your expectations. And moving into that, having consistency with yourself allows you to be accountable to yourself. Habits are hard to form, but they're also hard to break. So once you get into that rhythm of saying, I show up at work at 9, I leave work at 5:30, it helps you set a standard by which you can live. That doesn't mean you have to live and die by these numbers, right? Sometimes things happen, sometimes the train was late, sometimes you have a doctor's appointment, whatever. But we are creatures of habit. So making sure that you have routines in place, whether that's maybe you walk home from work and that's your time to decompress, or whether that means that you make sure regardless of anything else, you get 8 hours of sleep a night, or having a rule that no screens near your face after 10 p.m. When things get crazy, it's nice to fall back on our routines to give us a sense of normalcy. Finally, balance takes intention. I don't have the best work-life balance, but I found a point where my career is thriving, but I'm headed home enough to still be happy, healthy, and feel fulfilled by my hobbies in life. Sometimes I think staying late at work can be exactly the right call if it's buying you a future you want. That kind of seems like antithetical to everything I'm just saying, but I actually think it works nicely. In the end, you have to decide what's important for you in your life. And first that means you have to decide what's important from your job, right? For people who have kids, having flexible time, I think, is really important. Making sure that you can maybe leave early if your kid gets sick or you have to take them from daycare. Making sure that your management is encouraging a healthy lifestyle for you so that they're not asking you to work 12 hours a day. Maybe something like remote work so that you win back those commuting hours is important to you. And then on the other side of your job, making sure that you're intentional about what your working hours are and what you define as your working hours. Maybe that means that if you work remote, locking your home office or, so that you don't just wander in and start programming randomly. Maybe that means you set an alarm so that your laptop, that you just close your laptop, at 5:30 p.m. But what this means is being intentional is about making an explicit choice, not just defaulting into something because, that's what I was doing before, right? Secondly, allocate your time intentionally. I think it's important to say that it's okay to focus on your career. No one's saying that you have to have 20 hobbies and 35 best friends. If this is a point in time where you want to put your head down and work on your career, that's totally fine. If you say to yourself, well, actually this week I do want to work a little extra, I really want to finish this thing, that's fine, but ask yourself an honest question, which is, am I working hard for myself or am I working hard for the CEO of my company, right? If you're leveling up yourself, if you're building new skills, if you're doing things that are going to make you a more effective programmer, a more effective communicator, and an asset to whoever you work for next, I think that's fine. We all do these things. We all have to improve ourselves in our spare time. If you're just doing this so you can ship a feature for your company, maybe that's something that can stay within working hours and you can focus on other things to build yourself and make yourself better in all aspects of your life. And finally, make your own change, be your own change. Don't contribute to overwork culture. If you do happen to be working late, don't ping people when they're off. Don't ping people when they're on vacation. Don't, for example, push your commits at 3 a.m. and then have people see that you are working at 3 a.m. because they might feel pressured to also be working at 3 a.m. If you're in a position to give praise, or if you're a manager, try not to give bonuses or praise based on how long or late people were working. It makes people think that, if I say, oh, Jane, thank you for staying late and working until 3 a.m. on this project. I'm glad you finally got it shipped. And I give her a bonus for that. Suddenly everyone else is going to think, crap, do I have to stay until 3 a.m. if I want to get a bonus, right? These are things that we all unintentionally do occasionally. We'll say, hey, thank you for staying late and helping me finish that, which is fine if you say it one-on-one. But making this sort of proclamation to everyone means that that's kind of becoming an embodiment of the culture. And you want to make sure that as much as possible, the culture at your work reflects what you would want for yourself, which is letting people leave at a reasonable time. And if you forget everything else from this session, I want to leave you with this perfect recap that one of my friends gave. You are more important than your code. If you spend 6 hours in meetings and you didn't get any code written that day, you did your job by showing up to those meetings. If it's anything, it's the company's problem that they put you in so many meetings. It's not your problem that you got put in those meetings. In the end, we're all whole people, and we all deserve to be happy, and we all deserve to have a work-life balance that makes sense to us. So part of this is, I don't have the one true answer, but I want all of you to walk away from this feeling empowered that you can start to make changes in your life, whether that's talking to your boss, whether that's talking to your friends, whether that's like what Stacy said in the last talk and talking to a therapist. All of these are important ways to carve out that time to make us feel happy and healthy and sane. So finally, as this talk is wrapping up, I have some resources. These are things that I'll also publish these slides, so don't worry about it, taking a picture if you don't want to. The first one, 11 ways to tell if a company values work-life balance. I actually used this. I just changed jobs about 3 weeks ago, and this was a really useful article. It kind of details in very deep context questions you can ask, things you can look for that suggest that a company either values work-life balance from its employees or that it doesn't. The San Francisco Gender Equality Principles Indicator is written by, so I'm based in San Francisco, I don't know if you can guess that. And the city government built this tool to help evaluate the gender equality from within the context of work-life balance. But I think this is really important for people of any gender, because I said both men and women can have families. So that's useful just to use it as an evaluation of your current job, what things your job is doing well from the context of work-life balance, and what things are meant to be improved upon. Being glue is something, I mentioned like glue earlier. A lot of people, especially women, especially a lot of underserved populations, tend to be the glue in developer organizations. They tend to be the people doing what's seen as like non-technical work, whether that's like building consensus or working on architecture instead of programming. But that's important for all of us to recognize that that's a form of work in and of itself, and that's labor, and that takes time, and that takes effort, and you still feel drained when you get home at the end of the day. So there's a really good presentation that helped inform me on this and helped form my opinion on how that's part of work-life balance. So that's that. And then finally, you don't have to know it all. I think there's always new frameworks coming out. There's Jetpack Compose, there's Kotlin multi-platform, there's all of these crazy things. And we want to learn all of it, in one, because we're all nerds, let's be honest, and two, because we feel like we have to keep up and we're not going to be the best that we can be without knowing literally everything. It's okay. You don't have to know everything. You're still going to be a productive engineer, even if you don't know everything. We're all learning on the job, and part of our job is to learn, but that doesn't mean you have to be learning every spare minute of every day. So Nate Ebel has a really good blog post about this, and it was kind of the codification about, like, I kind of knew this before, and I read it, I was like, yes, that is exactly what I was trying to say. So read that, he said it better than I can. Finally, if you like what you hear, I work at a company called Front. We make a shared email client for teams. We are hiring a lot of back-end and infra positions. So we have an office in San Francisco and we have an office in Paris, and we're hiring in both of them. So feel free to reach out to me. That's my Twitter handle there if you couldn't guess that. And I think we probably have a little bit time for questions. Yeah, we have some time for questions. So thank you everyone for staying a little bit late at droidCon and talking with me about work-life balance.